Hi, welcome. My name is Michael Akimbamiro. Welcome to this third class in this series. Today, we're going to be talking and looking at the word vulnerability in cybersecurity. We already did authentication, authorization. Now we are going to vulnerability. So the reason why we are doing all this authentication, authorization within the environment is to make sure that we are not susceptible to vulnerabilities. So what are vulnerabilities? Vulnerabilities are gap within the system, okay? They are weaknesses in your system or your networks. So if we have a system in place that is running, what we need to do, what we want to do is to make sure that we are testing periodically. We are testing that system. We are scanning it for vulnerabilities to make sure there are no weaknesses within that system that hackers, threat actors can exploit. So that is vulnerability. Vulnerability talks about gaps and weaknesses within your network and your systems or even your process. So the way to determine that is testing, making sure that you are testing all your system to look for these vulnerabilities. You have to be intentional about it. Now, when a new product or a new piece of code is developed and put into production, we need to test that code before it goes into production, correct? And once we test it and we are okay with it, we put them into production. But that is not the end of that life cycle of that code. We also need to continuously test and make sure that that code is not being tampered with. There is nothing malicious that has been injected into that code. And we also want to make sure that there is even no way for somebody to even get that far into our systems. And that is why we tell people that authorization and authentication is very, very important. These are the guardrails. These are the people at the door before even people come into your environment. Now, looking at your environment also, you want to make sure that you are doing what we call penetration testing. You are doing periodic scan of your assets and your systems so that you can know or be alerted if there is any vulnerability or gaps or weaknesses in your system. Some companies will do vulnerability scan every day. Some people will do it every maybe 3 days. Some people will do it weekly. Some people do monthly. But you must be intentional about it. You must make it periodic so that you are continuously looking at these vulnerabilities that might exist within your system. There are several types of vulnerability. There are some that deals with your software, and they can be found within your software. We call them software vulnerabilities. Example of a software vulnerability would be SQL injection, for example. Your cross-site scripting will be another vulnerability on the software side. And when it comes to network, well, there are also network vulnerabilities. Network vulnerabilities would be something like unpatched system or using something like open ports. So when you are using port 80 instead of port 443, you are more susceptible to being attacked because that is an open port on an open internet. And if somebody hijack your session, they can get access to unauthorized information that they are not supposed to get to. Now, everything ties back to availability, the triad, the CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data. You want to make sure that nobody that does not need to have your information, access to your information does. So you want to make sure that you're keeping your data confidential. You are making sure that your data has that integrity, that nobody has placed anything malicious within your code or your data. And you ought to also make sure that whenever you need your data to be available to authorized user, it is available. So that's why you want to make sure that you limit, because you cannot remove all vulnerabilities. It's not possible, but you limit it. And also you make sure that as you are scanning your system and seeing this vulnerability, we are trying to fix them, but you have to do it also with your business, because these tools exist to make sure that we can run our business the way we want to run it. And when you scan, and you can now do what we call the criticality. So you look at each vulnerability one by one, and then you determine the criticality of those vulnerabilities to your system. And based on that criticality, you can begin to prioritize how to fix them. All right. So I already mentioned about the software vulnerabilities. I've also mentioned network vulnerabilities, like open port, unencrypted communication, and then we have what we call human vulnerability, the people that work in our environment, the workers, from the top board director to the least in the organization. Everybody is a target. So you want to make sure that people are not getting targeted and people are not clicking on the wrong link to. And this happens through phishing attack, and phishing attack, happens because of human vulnerability. Because when people start to click things that they are not supposed to click in your environment, they can be clicking things that gives access to malware, ransomware, and things like that. Also making sure that configuration vulnerability is another one, making sure that you are also looking at that. So how your systems are configured. We talk about authorization in our last class. And then we talk about, broken access control list. So broken access control means that something was not configured properly. So all the configurations, we must test them before we put them into production. And we must test them vis-a-vis security. We must make sure that they continue to remain secure. We must also understand how our system connects to other systems. We have to have a holistic approach in our cybersecurity defense. We must make sure that all the ports, all the calls that they are making, all the API calls that are being made are all going through secure connections. And then we have what we call firewalls in place to filter, packets, to filter the communications, to filter those traffic that are going, and also make sure that even where our data is at rest, we are also putting in tools and configuration like encryption to make sure that data is not just sitting down there in plain text where somebody can break in and steal our data. So another one, in configuration vulnerability that just came to my head is when you have like weak password. Those are, I've seen environment where somebody put password as password. Those are not good enough. Then hardware, hardware vulnerability, making sure that you have firmware vulnerability, that you are looking at security flaws in devices. So making sure that we are looking at all these things holistically. And again, the reason why we are looking at all this, the reason why we are doing this is to make sure that we are able to protect our assets, we are able to protect our organization from malicious actors. Now, vulnerability and threat. At times they sound like, vis-a-vis, they sound like, oh, they go together, but there is a difference, okay? So vulnerability, like I said, are the gaps and the weaknesses, but threat are the things that actually, take advantage of vulnerabilities to attack, our system. So threats are risks, threats are, things that are used, exploit vulnerabilities to attack a system or to attack a network. So there is a bit of a difference there. And just like vulnerabilities are found in different areas, even threats is the same thing. They are found in different areas also, where you have human threats, you have natural threats. They just happen, right? Like COVID. You have human threats, people that are trying to just get a payday. They're not sleeping every day. They are trying to get as systems is being developed, they are also developing how to break into those systems. Then we have environmental accidental threats. But no matter what it is, when you do vulnerability scans, when you are always, on your toe to make sure that you are putting security at the forefront, then you are better prepared to respond. And not having something like incident response plan when things happen is also another form of vulnerability. We must have a communication plan. We must be ready when things break. We must be able to respond quickly. Find it, isolate it, stop it, and then communicate, learn from it, so that it doesn't continue to happen. So those are the things that are essential in this field that security analysts can help with. Security analysts should be, advising our organization, our people, MDs, whoever, those that are making the business decisions to look at. And then vulnerabilities also is not equal. Okay, so you look at vulnerability based on their criticality. Some are very critical, some are maybe in their medium, some are high. So, and then you prioritize how to actually work on those vulnerability and fix them. Unpatched system is another type of vulnerability in the network. People not patching the system even when the update is there. Those are negligence. Those are things that shouldn't even be happening. Once you have a new update, please update the system so that, we don't have continuous, weakness just laying around or sitting around in our system. All right, guys, like I told you, I'm going to make it short. That is all about vulnerability today. We're going to be going next into our next topic. Thank you, and God bless you all.